Welcome to Food, Wine, and Whiskey, a podcast about having fun conversations on tasty dishes, vinos, and spirits from around the world. Rob is your host. He is an avid home chef, WSET Level 2 award in wine, and a whiskey drinker and collector. Time to set the table. Here's Rob.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Food, Wine, and Whiskey. I would say another episode, but it's actually part 2 of the previous episode, Tipping in America. We're going to get right back into it in just a few minutes. Before we do, let me ask you, if you haven't already, like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen, on Spotify, Google, YouTube, anywhere, and leave us a review wherever you listen. That really helps the podcast. It helps us in the algorithm so other folks can find the show. All right, we're going to jump right back into this conversation. It's been fun so far, and it continues in part 2. Kristopher and Pasha, back to Tipping in America. Rest of the conversation. Let's join back in.
Tipping on
Is it different between a cocktail and a beer?
It's changed
for sure.
quite a bit.
That's
yeah.
No, I mean, is it different in today's environment between a cocktail? Do you tip differently on a cocktail than you do? So if I'm if I'm here and I'm just sitting outside and I come in and get my beer and they draw it and I leave $1 every time, is that acceptable?
Look, so here's the thing: none of us are going to get mad at you. I think there's.
I walk away and they'll go, "That cheap motherfucker."
No, we talk about victimization, but I don't think that you guys need to worry about this, honestly, because nobody, despite the fact that people get mad on Facebook, which happens, and people yell at each other on Facebook, in reality, fundamentally, nobody gives a shit. It might be it's frustrating sometimes. If you're monopolized by a guest who wants to chat at you and take you away from other guests, and so they don't get as good a service, and and then they don't tip. That sucks because you've spent a lot of time taking care of them. They're very demanding of your time at the expense of other guests who are then having their experience sacrificed for that person. So that in that case, somebody might get upset if they're time, they're not being compensated for the time. But generally speaking, no, because it comes out in the wash. The other thing though is that I will say overthinking the tipping aspect for me is I think part of an issue. If you want to tip $1 a beer or whatever, that's cool, man. Do it.
It's more of me understanding. It's not me trying to question or push back on it. I'm trying to understand what is the culture today.
I don't think that there's a homogenous culture. I think there is what you want to do. You know what I mean? I think generally speaking,
I don't know that I agree with that.
I think there is a societal expectation that we're moving towards, by and large, that 20 to 25% tip, regardless of whether or not you order food, and a lot of times after tax. But we're moving towards.
I'm gonna poke fun at you a little bit in good nature, but is society in the room with us right now? Are they going to get mad at you? And it's.
I'm okay with you poking fun.
I think that's a little bit of a sort of. To me, it's a silly thing to get upset about or worried about, because your experience when you go to a restaurant.
So if they don't get the tip, you're not worried about it.
It all comes out in the wash. Again,
because it sounded earlier that you were very passionate that they get that.
What I care about. Hang on. To clarify, what I care about is a broad conversation that puts, I think, or minimizes the work that hospitality workers do and gives people a reason in their head to tip less. I think that's what I don't like.
That's fair, but to be clear, it's not to diminish them, I think, unjustifiably. It's to say that, hey, there should be a line, and this is quickly either going past the line or off the rails that we can't even have a discussion about it. At what point do you determine, should they make, because it happens in every other job, in every other industry, you determine what the average salary is for first responders,
but you're not.
for cops.
In the average, and
it's based on
I don't know
what their value is to whatever the community, the society, whatever that value is. There's a value put on.
I think that for me, also the biggest concern that I have with hospitality, and it's not like any of the industry that I've experienced, is that if you're a server, and it's one of the things when I mentioned the minimum take-home pay that we would have when we first opened, is that what bothers me about people in this industry is that when I go to work, again, if I'm not feeling well, if I'm not in a bad mood, and I go to my office, I still know that I'm going to get paid that day based on my salary. If over the span of a year or so, if my boss gets tired of me, then they might fire me or whatever. But servers, when they come to work, they don't know how much money they're going to make.
But we've already given you examples of salespeople who are in the same world.
And
sure.
There's a lot of people who are in the same. Sure. Doctors in that world. If he doesn't get clients to come into him, he's not.
It is a choice to be in this industry.
But I sympathize with those people too. If you have, I would say, and again, I'm not speaking for those in the industry. I'm speaking for hospitality, and that's what we're talking about
But
today.
you are choosing to be in the hospitality industry, so you are choosing that you need to put on a pretty face. And I don't mean that it's a gender thing. I just mean a smile.
I'm not. I will smile at other people, but but also we need these people in this industry. It's one of the most important in terms of our social.
But it doesn't
fabric.
mean we can't hold them accountable.
Sure, if you
to
want.
simple
Again,
standards.
so here's the thing.
I have kids, and they're older now, but they've went through school. And I'm giving kind of this example as it's a bit extreme, but just to kind of see if this does anything. If my kids are in school and the teacher that they have is going through a divorce and just treating the class and my student, my child, her student, like crap every day, but that's just her job, should I put up with that? And go, well, she's just going through, she's going through a tough time, she's just treating the class that way. She doesn't come in. Or should she be able to go, I've got to separate what's going on in my personal life, come to work, and be able to perform at work.
We need them, but they're choosing to be. Now, I've been coming into this bar since it opened. If I come in here and Pasha's in a spicy mood, I'm going to say he's probably just in a spicy mood. I know Pasha.
I'm always in a spicy mood.
I know, but but I know you. There's an established rapport. I'm going to probably tip you the same. My tip is not going to change regardless because I know you. There's a rapport. But if the next person, the first time coming into Rosewater, experiences spicy Pasha and it's off-putting and she doesn't tip you as well for it,
or come back,
yeah, then I understand it and that's totally okay. That's totally
reasonable.
But
the thing is, but also there's different types of accountability because that affects the bar as a whole, the business as a whole, as well as the individual, and
which is on the waiter, not the customer.
Sure, sort of.
So it's on you that the rest of the pool.
That's
is
what
not
I'm
as
saying.
good as
You
it
have to
was.
separate personal, whatever. You can't make, hey, well, they're in a bad mood or this happened.
I get it. I'm saying yes. So that is just a reality. So I'm not going to say that shouldn't happen, or because it whether or not I think it should or shouldn't is irrelevant. It will happen. That's just the nature of.
I think what we're saying is it's going to happen. Shit always happens, but it should be at a.
And that's why I'm
smaller,
saying a 70 to 100 in performance. If you've got someone that's having an off-put day, that person is going to affect the tip pool, but no one's really going to say anything if it's above a certain standard. There is a range, a gray area in there where they're not exactly, they're not flipping off customers, but maybe they're performing at 18% tips that day when everyone else in the bar is performing at 25. They're not going to lose their job. They're still meeting standards, but they are affecting the pool.
But I also agree then at some point that 95% performer is going to go, why the fuck am I working so hard?
Yep. And that's true.
Keep
and
losing
lower
my
the
money.
standard.
But
now
that's
we've lowered the standard.
But that's a risk of this industry. That's a risk of any industry.
But I don't know why the industry went to that. It didn't used to be that way.
Which is why this is such a hot topic.
Well, we don't really.
Right
to be honest, I don't think we really know that. I don't know. I don't know how.
I don't either.
How much accountability there exists in distribution of.
Or why? Why would they
service.
make it a pool? What's the benefit to the?
Well, it's really to be more fair to those who aren't front of the house.
So, it depends on the type of pool. So, like the pool that I'm talking about is an entirely front of the house pool, and because we rotate positions, and all the positions kind of contribute equally, and we sort of decided this collectively. Like we, when we first opened, for example, there were just two of us bartending, and so we interact with all the guests, and so we just split the tips at the end of the night. And a lot of bars, I think that's pretty normal because you don't have individual guests. Like, I may take care of the guests for their first drink. My other bartender might take care of them for their second drink.
You don't have people fighting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it just makes it, quite frankly, easier.
I mean, bar environment, I get it.
Yeah. And every kind of
more restaurants.
Yeah. Everybody kind of does their own job. In a restaurant, it's different. And again, I don't have experience in restaurants because I never worked in restaurants. Yeah. So I can't say that for sure.
Well, let's talk about, as we get finishing up this. I think we've kind of, Chris, unless you have something else.
No.
I think we've kind of back and forth with Pasha on kind of where we stand. I think people kind of understand where we're coming from and obviously where you're coming from.
I think, and just to again summarize, like I understand there are several different concerns, but like I understand people, feeling the societal pressure to tip. I feel it too. Like when you said earlier, I get it, man. When I go order a cup of coffee and it's I don't, and coffee is a different model, right? Like it's not historically the same as restaurants and bars, and so typically I would assume that they're getting paid a higher wage.
Oh, they are.
And so why am I getting asked to subsidize? I'm still going to do it, and that's just my nature. I'm a slave to tipping. You ask me to tip, I'm going to tip. I don't give a shit. It's just the way I am. But I get the concern that
would you call that a privilege though?
For me, it is. I have enough money that I can tip generously.
Exactly. I think that's a good point. Is there's a lot of people who are not in the privileged position, but feel kind of obligated.
Even when I didn't, I still had that. This is a philosophy I've had since I was a kid. It started because my dad, as an immigrant, he told me stories of waiting tables in Chicago. And there's it's ridiculous to say, but there's a scene in My Blue Heaven where Steve Martin goes on about tipping, and it affected me as a kid. And I think I enjoy tipping.
Mr.
So even
Pink.
when
Reservoir Dogs.
that's the opposite for me. But the opposite, I enjoy tipping generously whenever I can, even when I didn't have a lot of money when I was in college.
I grew up Pentecostal, and we were the same way. The saying was "Give till it hurts."
Agreed.
And I'm 100%. And you will never catch me. Anyone listening to this that has waited on me in the past will not be able to find a single incident in which I didn't overtip. The issue I run into is a broader sensibility of the whole thing. At the very same time as me complaining in this episode, I'm gonna pay for this beer and I'm gonna tip.
I refuse to let you pay for that beer.
You gotta let me pay.
It's inhospitable for me to charge you for a beer that was just for fun.
Let me take down the Yelp review I just left you.
No. But again, so I think the thing ultimately that people should really understand is that you don't have to tip. We have created this model in our society where you don't have to. If you want to, I honestly encourage you. No, because nobody's gonna chase you out. Nobody here, if you don't tip well, nobody here is gonna yell at you or criticize you.
Yeah, but next time you come in, your picture might be somewhere where they'll be like, "Don't help that."
But what I see that as sort of like.
But let me also say, I don't think in general people don't mind tipping.
No, they don't, and they're very generous.
Don't.
And that's the thing.
I don't
also
mind tipping.
So we're getting into the real nuts and bolts of labor issues. And I get fired up about labor issues a lot. So that's part of this. But but in general, people are generous. And they are appreciated, and there's no sort of at least in my experience, there's no demand.
Well, my big reason for wanting to have this conversation was two things. One, understanding the percentages. Why the hell has it gone up and continues? For 2 years ago, it was 20, 22, 25. I am on a regular basis seeing 22, 25, and 30 now, and I'm going, where is this going to kind of...
Something else just occurred to me also, which is that, so for us, for example, the crafts, I hate the term craft cocktail, but the craft cocktail renaissance actually changed a lot. And so the amount of service, when we're talking about tip $1 a drink at a bar,
100%
you're cracking open a bottle of beer, giving it to them, you can crank out, you can make a shitload of money that night.
Yeah.
But now you've got to make your drinks not only taste delicious,
takes time.
You've got to make them. It takes longer. It takes physically more time to make these drinks.
Sure.
You have to make them beautiful. People want Instagram-worthy shit. The amount of work and service that goes into it has also increased.
Sure.
And so I think, to be honest, and I'm sorry this didn't occur to me before, but to be honest, I think one reason that it is, because I have these conversations with my staff, is I think the reason that the baseline for tipping percentage has gone up is because the involvement and the level of service.
But you're charging more for that because of that.
But again, the charge doesn't include the service or labor.
Yeah, it's really charging for the cost of goods.
The charges for the cost of goods, for AC. So
honestly,
I think that's the answer. I think we can probably...
We can blame the craft cocktail movement.
Well, that's in the bar environment. I'll give you that in that environment. But when we start talking restaurants and food and things like that,
if you look at the general level of presentation for a plate of food, it has become much more advanced. And the amount of, I think, interactions that for me, again, it's mostly bar. I feel like the increased the amount of time and service required to make and deliver drinks has increased. And again, the menu prices don't reflect that because it's just not.
But do you think 30% is
for me personally? Yes, I think it's fine.
I think
I don't think you need to worry about.
Should it go more?
I would love to see it go higher, but I think it's again. This is just me as someone who wants to see all of my staff. I would love all my staff to be millionaires.
What do you think the ceiling should be?
I think the ceiling right now feels like probably 30 because it's also what people are willing to pay.
Now. This brings up a good tangential conversation. I don't know how are we doing on time.
We're fine.
So I had this conversation with someone recently about the food culture in Houston. By and large, the number of legacy restaurants is very minimal in Houston. A lot of openings and closings. And when I worked at Culture Map said that their number one clicks on articles for their digital platform, their news media, was list of restaurants opening or list of restaurants closing. And it might come down to, as we continue this expectation of a higher climb, that people are just going to stay home and we continue to see this churn, whereas a lot of this tipping culture pressure has been on the flash in the pan restaurants.
But what's the pressure? Again, what's the pressure?
What I mean is the pressure, and I think it means more than you are willing to give it credit for in this conversation, but I think when your receipt says 15, 18, 20 or 18, 20, 22 versus 20, 25, 30, that is going to affect return customers.
I don't feel that. But like if you're as a customer, so to speak, I don't feel that at all.
Oh,
Well,
really?
No.
You're a unique customer
Yeah,
because
that's true. That's a
you
good
live
point.
and breathe and
No, but even before, I just don't. It doesn't.
even before you bought this place, your soul was this environment. Like,
Yeah, I mean, but
Well,
I was
wait a
an
second. I want to
enthusiast.
push back on that because you told me your opinions of the world of tipping had changed prior to you being an owner to then diving into this world.
well, just
and
because I see more. The only thing is that I see how difficult this job is, and so like it's you have to go like if you're a bartender, you have to break up a fight. We had somebody try to piss outside the fucking building the other day. There's like a neighborhood that's behind us, and so there's a kid who lives in one of these bedroom windows. Some guy's pulling his dick out trying to piss behind the bar.
wait, is that not allowed?
We didn't know it was you when it was happening, so I want to apologize. No. So,
mixed back.
Well, here's a question for you. I remember when it was 15, 18, 20, I always, when I had exceptional service, I wanted to leave more than 20. I wanted that person to really know I thought they did an exceptional job. Did you do that prior to when it was 18, 20?
For sure, yeah.
Do you still do it now? If it says 20, 22, 25, you go 30, 35?
yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the bourbon brand America Bourbon?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so a couple years ago, for those who aren't familiar, there was a bourbon brand that was started by a guy named Derek Sisson called America. Not America, America.
Apostrophe.
And it was, the entire label was covered in red, white, and blue, and it was Trump-era bourbon brand.
I'm very curious to see where this is going.
And the very first 2 years, during the height of Trump and blah, 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 they did something like something crazy. It was like 40,000 cases. It was some crazy number. And Gulf Coast got involved and was like, oh, this brand's worth a ton of money. We're going to buy it. Then, like, right after Trump's out, Biden's in office, dropped to fucking 3,000 cases because it was a novelty.
Sure.
And my whole point is I think, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of really great concepts that have sprouted in Houston, but just like the breweries in Houston where people are paying $20, $25 for 4-pack 16-ounce beers, and breweries are closing doors left and right over the last 5 years, and cocktail bars and restaurants have, because the novelty of those things, the expense is great the first few times, but if there's not a sustainable and affordable drink available on that menu and you don't have at least that customer base, a lot of these places don't survive.
Yep.
And I do think that this constant push of 30, 35 on the higher end cocktail place is going to drastically affect the longevity of a lot of places.
35 now? We're talking 35 now?
I've seen it as high as 35. I've seen 30. I've seen 35.
As a recommended? So again, I want to get back to the thing that we first started, which is that the nature of the industry in the United States is that effectively all the labor costs are pushed to the customer in the form of tips.
Sure.
And so if I were, for example, let's say I was operating a very, very highfalutin bullshit cocktail bar, like where you're doing like all kinds of molecular nonsense, and you've only got it requires so much time to prepare a drink that you can only do like 10 covers a night. You're only serving 10 cocktails. For that employee, like let's just think about that. Like for that employee to make even close to being able to pay their rent, you would probably want to have suggested gratuity at like 100%. Because they're only able to make 10 cocktails the entire night, right? So just
but I would also think that your cost for that would be way more, because part of that is the experience of making that cocktail. I think about it like in an omakase bar. There's some bars that you can only seat 12 people, and
right.
They come in and experience dinner. But the cost is
it is
because of
the cost on the menu doesn't really incorporate labor, right? Because that the amount that you're paying, unless it's like a service included kind of situation, it all gets down to the fact.
I mean, labor has to be in there somewhere.
It's not. That's what I'm saying. It's not, and that's
so
just
back of house labor is not included.
Back of the house labor is typically included. Basically, because you have tipped and you have non-tipped employees, and so tipped employee labor is included in your labor costs. Your food typically, but for most bars, it's all tipped labor for the most part, and so that's not included in the prices on the menu. It just isn't, and that's why it's fucked up, honestly. Like, because I wish we had a situation like in Europe where like the friendliness of service, and you're right, you guys are right. Like there is an incentive, and I
Can
feel
you just
too.
mark that down? Just send me the clip.
Yeah,
You are-
117.13.
Yes.
We were right.
So you guys are right in the sense that knowing that I can, if I'm bartending, knowing that I can wow a guest and give them a little razzle dazzle, I might get a little bit higher money on a gratuity. Does incentivize me to a point to
Well, and I would hope that you also not only incentivize you for earning potential, but I would hope if you're in this industry, you like interacting with people.
And that's true. Like I do it because I love hospitality. Like the shit that happens, like people will come in celebrating some of their highest achievements in life or some of their worst days, and they come to this bar for a little bit of solace or celebration, and I cannot tell you how much I love that. That is the reason that I'm in this industry, a reason a lot of people in this industry. And so that is true. But like if you look at Europe, for example, the level of service is very different. And it's, they're not a gratuity motivated, typically industry there. But they also get higher wages. Most of them have health insurance and stuff that we don't get here for the most part. So
how many, and I'm not asking specific information, this shouldn't be a HIPAA violation, but how many of, let's say you've got 10 employees here? Mm-hmm. How many opt for the health insurance plan?
the majority of them.
Really?
Yeah, for sure.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, that is interesting to me too, because I think younger, healthier, they're like, I'm not going to spend my money right now on that.
When
I mean,
waited
shit, life
tables-
happens, dude. Like, well, it's so there's, but also like my staff tends to be a little bit older.
Okay.
So it's just we don't hire anybody younger than 21, and it typically takes a while for them to get comfortable, for us to get comfortable with them, and then we get comfortable here because we just have a lot of stuff we do. But I mean, like most people, especially, and also here's the other thing, if we get into gender issues, the majority of my staff are women, and women have very specific healthcare needs that often get overlooked. And so it's
I'm
easy.
just kidding.
Let me be controversial. Can you define woman for me? I'm just kidding.
I can't. It's so women tend to have healthcare needs their entire life, and men are very reckless, and so we tend to reject health insurance.
Yeah.
We tend to be very stupid.
Well, and the other part of women being employees, it's not a bad thing, but it's just if they have a baby, there's a period of time they're not here, and that impacts your ability to staff and do things. And so,
yeah, I mean,
I get it.
That's true. But but with respect to healthcare, that's the
Let's shift and see if we can find some areas in tipping that we might agree on with Pasha.
So I would just say I don't fundamentally disagree.
He already said we're right.
There was one thing that you happen to, I think,
be a very short
been
podcast.
close to being on the proximity of being correct, and that's
I'm wondering your opinion, just because of how you feel about tipping. Not that it's bad or whatever.
Sorry, and I get there's one other point I want to get across. Tipping itself, I don't give a shit about. All I care about is that employees in this industry and any other industry have the capability to earn a decent living, basically. That's it. So if it comes from tipping or if labor costs are included in the price, I don't give a shit. I'm agnostic. I just want them to have a decent quality of life. That's it. So it just so happens in this country, tipping is how that happens, which, to be honest, sucks a little bit.
But again, I just come back to that's their choice. I mean, you look at industries, one, you have to have a passion, you have to have a want, a like, you want to work somewhere you enjoy doing that type of work. But then, two, you go, okay, how can I be the best at this? And you can, we've already given examples how you can move up in this industry to different types of establishments that might offer you the ability to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
One of my chief concerns, and this is going to come out, I'm trying real hard to word this carefully. One of my chief concerns is on my social media timeline, people have complained about inflation, sure. But the ones that are complaining about it the most are mostly service industry folks. The record greed, corporate greed, profits. Don't get me wrong, I don't disagree. I definitely think that things have gotten crazy. In fact, when I graduated high school, I remember meeting a guy who was making $125 a year, and I looked it up recently, and today would be over $200,000. The same, so it's just the record growth. But complaining about it and doing nothing career-wise is a problem. But I'm not trying to bash. And I keep tapping the table, I apologize. I'm not trying to bash the industry, but I am saying I don't think the solution to the constant inflation is to argue that we need to start tipping 50% at some point.
I don't think nobody's suggesting that. And it's
But we kind of are when we say we just need to make enough money.
That is why I brought this up, is because you mentioned the rising cost of everything and how it's this has come up quite a bit.
I only brought I don't think that. So if there's one thing that's been brought up repeatedly, which is the shift of the baseline from like 15% to say 25%. I actually don't think that's necessarily a side of inflation, and it dawned on me, and I'm sorry it didn't occur to me earlier, but I really do think that is the shift in the service that is expected to make the types of products that people want these days. It is much. It takes much more time.
Here's what I think it is, and I think it's much more simple than that. I think it's COVID. I think a lot of us tipped at a much higher level.
That's what happened to the bourbon secondary market when everyone got those free checks.
All
of a sudden, Elmer T. Lee was $400 a bottle.
Yeah, and we did it willfully, going, hey, man, these guys aren't working, to wait for those staff who can't work in-house because they can't be open, to give them some extra money. We all did it freely and willingly and happily. And then it just kind of stayed.
That's the jump from 20 to 25, but there was a jump from 15 to 20 before that.
So
as a standard,
I think
we've at this bar, what our guests tip has always been about 25% since 8 years ago since we opened.
But I think bars, again, it comes back to that experience. I know we're talking about I don't want to say it's unique, but bars are kind of a different type of than
it's
restaurants.
Not the standard of it. Yeah.
I mean, I can only speak from my experience owning a bar.
Because going to bars, man, I tip too, because you have a good time in a bar.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. But I mean, it's true. Although sometimes people get like agitated occasionally.
Pee outside.
Yeah. For that, I expect 50%. If I have to clean up your piss, I expect 50%.
Wait, did you have to clean it up?
Outside, no, but we've had people piss inside. We've had people throw up, not all the time, but occasionally.
I've actually been here for one of the throw incidents.
Let's talk about a couple of other things that I think have been in the tipping world where it's kind of grown to. Is it acceptable? Is it something that we all agree that should be there or shouldn't be there? One for me is, I'll give the example. My wife and I were out in Phoenix a couple months ago. I had a work project out there. I had her come out. She found this brunch place, pretty cool place. I said, okay, let's go check it out. It's got good reviews. We go to this place, looks cool. We get ready to walk in. They go, no, you got to go outside and order. There's this dark window, and you got to order right there. So we order, and of course it asks you for a tip, and I hate that. And I don't know if it's just me. I hate getting asked for a tip before you've done a damn thing. Because, again, that's in addition to what I'm paying for the food. So, anyway, we order our food. She orders a Bloody Mary. I order a coffee. And I've already tipped. And I go, by the way, we'd each like a water, too. Can you let them know that? And she went, water station's over there. It's self-serve. Help yourself. And I went, well, okay, I tipped you.
Yeah.
So we went in. Our food came. My wife's was wrong. They sat it down. We figured out it was wrong. Mine was cold. They never came back, checked on us again. And I'm going, what the hell did I just tip for?
This actually really, I think what you hit on is a fascinating example that really ties together all the different uncertainties about tipping culture in this country. And it's a great example because, like, some aspects of it I agree with. And so, like, for example, I've seen it increasingly in a lot of restaurants have removed front of house staff and gone to that sort of like counter service model because it saves them on the overhead of some, even though that's not a lot of labor they pay, there's still some. And also there's more tips to go around for the few staff that they have. And they might be using those tips to, if they have zero servers, to subsidize the cost of their labor in the back of the house, which is fucked up, but whatever. And so you're being asked to pay a labor. So I think it's also helpful to rethink of instead of tips, think of it as a labor charge. You are being asked to pay a labor charge or fee or whatever.
Given the option to pay it.
Or given the option, right. And so for those, and that's a new thing. A lot of us haven't seen this before. And so
that's a big shift.
It is
to get the consumer to go from, trying to understand this is a tip that I'm giving you in appreciation of a service that you've given me, to now it's just an expected to offset labor costs for an establishment.
And that's the thing. That gets to the heart of why I think it's the tipping model can be a little bit problematic, is because while in some cases historically the bulk of it, at least in the modern era, even though it has roots in racism, in the modern era, it's just been a way for restaurants to exist and offset their labor costs or to push.
So the scenario I gave you, you're kind of okay with that?
No. I what I'm saying, you question it, because what I see.
You're okay with his feelings.
I'm okay with your feelings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
He's agreeing with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm passionately agreeing.
Yeah.
No, because it's very strange, and there's been a lot of fuckery, I think, in the way, especially some of these corporate chains manage or suppress their labor costs or pass them on to the consumer in ways that we don't get a lot of insight into. And so, I'm curious about some of those places and how much they're actually paying their staff.
Well, that was, as a consumer, I'm having the conversation with my wife as we're eating, going, as we're finishing up, I go, I bet this wait staff who's picking up tables and doing stuff, they don't get an extra dime of any of these tips. So they're going, why the hell am I going to help
and
you? I'm not making any more money. I'm just going to pick up the table.
Exactly. And you really won't know. And that's why I firmly encourage people to become regulars at local restaurants, because especially local restaurants, the more you go to and support your local restaurants, one, you're benefiting your own community, and you also get to see how the staff, how they are, basically, how long they stay, what their general attitudes are, if they're happy with where they're working. And that actually, I think, gives you a better indication that what you're paying in tip or gratuity or whatever is actually making a meaningful difference. Sure. Then, for example, if you go to any number of corporate chains that especially have eliminated front of the house service and are basically just using you and your guilt to subsidize their bottom line. And that's, I think, the easiest way for us as consumers to figure that out.
But just to be clear, though, isn't the entire tipping culture subsidizing their labor?
Yes, but what I'm saying is that in some cases, the restaurants may not be distributing money as you think they are, for example. Or
they might be stealing some of the tips.
Or historically, they might be using those, they might be paying all their kitchen staff shit wages and using again, there's not a front of the house
their percentage of the
model.
tips, yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so other examples would be Starbucks or Torchy's Tacos. You go in, you order, they ask for a tip, you get a buzzer, you got to come back up, get your food. Do you tip there?
I don't go to Starbucks, but I unless I have to. But
or places like that, just as an
so
example.
it depends. I mean, again, I like to tip, and I know
But
people
who are you tipping in that scenario?
I believe, especially if it's cash, that it's going to the staff, and cash is a more direct way to pay the staff. For sure, I'll encourage you if you want to really make a difference in your.
I'm all for supporting staff. Yeah. I question whether those dollars go to the staff or does it go to the franchise owner who's
That's
just
going,
hey, if they're going to give it, it's just to my bottom line.
I don't know. And again, that goes back to the thing.
A lot of states it's illegal.
It is illegal, but a lot of
laws
laws
for a tip or to what? To not give a portion of it.
For them to keep their tips.
For them to keep the tips.
Is there a percentage that they have to give out?
No. The like, for instance, in Houston, I know for sure in Texas, if a manager on shift, unless they're working, they cannot keep part of the tips.
They have to be part of the
the tips
pool.
have to go to the actual workers,
not management. 100% of it.
100%.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So see, I didn't know that.
But like we all hear stories all the time about, especially in restaurants, it happens in particular.
Yeah, there was a picture going around recently of a bucket with a chain on it, where money would go in the bucket, but the bucket was chained shut behind the bar. It was in Houston. I could find the photo.
Was it real?
Yeah. It was essentially someone had a tip bucket. All the tips were in the tip bucket. The tip bucket had a lid on it with a chain on it.
That might be to prevent theft.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But also, like, at the end of the shift, they would take the bucket to the manager's office, and then he would count it and say, "This is how much was in there." And that was the whole. It was in Liquid Ninjas. I don't know if you're in that group. There's a couple of bar forums.
I mean, I think like any business, there are scrupulous people and there are unscrupulous people, and so there's no easy answer to it.
Well, okay, some other tipping things that I've had people ask me to make sure were brought up as a topic. Delivery. If there's a delivery fee, do you still tip?
One, if you
that's for both.
So here's actually the thing that I didn't realize until I started working, and I got feedback from my staff who worked at other restaurants. But if I, for example, order takeout, I tip on it as if I were sitting there, because somebody has to take the time to put that. Again, it comes back to the fact that it's labor costs. So there's somebody who is probably in the tip pool who's putting together to-go orders, who is losing time that they would otherwise have been spending taking care of a table, and so it's a good idea to tip on takeout orders, for example.
You might have a very good example of something that logically makes sense, but has become and has been a societal norm since the invention of delivery pizza, that you don't think about it. So when the idea that you pay a delivery fee would obviously cover the gas and the mileage, but which is also paying for the convenience to have it come to my house, and he's not waiting on me. But yeah, of course, I still tip.
And you should drivers. For delivery. You should. The other thing is, like, if you're talking about like DoorDash or one of the online
those
apps,
two, yeah,
those fees. Who the fuck knows where those are going?
Those fees. I mean, I never ordered. Well, I never have DoorDash or any of those, just because I know restaurants get just clobbered with fees, and
when it comes to like pizza, though, for example, like generally speaking, anytime
if it's delivery, I tip.
I always tip. Yeah, for sure.
Now you make a very good point, and you may have swayed me on my thoughts on
unacceptable
pickup. Yeah,
pickup. So pickup is something I actually learned.
I usually never tip because I'm like I'm going out. I'm spending my time. I'm getting. But you just brought up a point of they're losing an opportunity to earn tips somewhere else, and I didn't even think about that.
And that is something I was ignorant of when I was.
What?
Go ahead.
Say it again.
Give it again.
Yes, I did not. I was very ignorant about this. When I first started,
I missed it. But
I'll say it again. Kristopher Hart. I was not aware of this this particular situation. Before I opened this restaurant and was regularly talking to my staff, it didn't occur to me that the person who was prepping the food, I thought it was like the kitchen or something.
That's what I thought.
And not a tipped employee. And because I'd never worked in a restaurant before. And so what I learned very quickly is that typically it's front of the house tip pool staff that are putting together those takeout orders, and they're losing money basically when they have to spend a lot of time doing those takeout orders. And so I started tipping on takeout.
I'm sorry. But are they not okay? So, and this may not be the case anymore, but back in my day, the wait staff made $2.15 an hour, whatever it is, $2.13. Bartenders made like $8 something an hour, and then the people who did to-go orders also made a higher wage.
That's what I thought.
It's possible. It's possible.
They also got part of the tip out for sure, but they were already paid more to stand there and prepare orders.
It's possible, but what I was told is that they are not basically, and even if they are, they're not, to account for the amount of time that they're having to spend putting to-go orders, that they're not making as much as people think they are. And so
they're earning potential much less than somebody who's waiting tables in the restaurant.
For the amount of time, for the amount of labor they're putting into it. Again, it all comes kind of down to the fact that the way the restaurant industry works is it takes its labor costs and outsources them to the guests, essentially, to the customers.
So, but they are still making a livable wage?
I have no idea. I've never worked as a takeout wrapper or whatever. But what I've seen in some restaurants.
Why would you sign up to do to-go?
Nobody signs up just to do to-go. That's my point, exactly. I think what is very likely happening is that if they, like for example here, if somebody, we don't have a formal to-go service and we don't do DoorDash and that shit. But if we're not a takeout place, and so if somebody calls in and orders takeout, which does happen, it takes one of my staff members who is on the current floor to go take their time away and wrap up some food and get it to go. And so I think it's very possible. And again,
I'm with you.
I would have to get a restaurant owner to verify this, or a worker. You'll probably get more accuracy from the worker, but I find it very difficult to believe, unless it's a takeout only type of restaurant, that they would employ a dedicated takeout person.
So how much would you tip?
I tip the standard percentage.
30% on pickup.
I typically 30% for me personally. You don't have to. Again, that's just me. And the thing I want people to understand is what is very clear to me when I see people interacting with my employees, with me, is that people generally are actually generous and like to go out. And I know you guys care about this. The reason you're having this conversation openly is because I know you care about it.
Sure.
And we contribute quite a bit to this industry specifically. Like I love to go out. I love to visit new cocktail bars. Yeah. And when I'm on the road, I don't go to chains. I think it's a travesty for you to go to a freaking Golden Corral in Ohio. Like if you're out exploring the world, you should go find a hole.
That's exactly what.
Even in Houston, that's my goal in life, is to just find a grave and lay in it and die in my hole.
No, but just explore that culture.
I
contribute to that local community.
But even here locally in Houston, I mean, you mentioned it earlier about the great food scene that we have. You can still do that here.
Yeah.
I mean, you can still explore, and that's all my wife and I do. I mean, we love to cook and we love to host and hang out. But when we go out, we'll go out tonight. We're going to try to find a place that's cool and different and locally owned, and and there's an expectation. I get back to expectations. My expectation from that is I'm going to get a level of service. I'm going to get food that's presented to me from somebody who loves what they're doing. That's their passion. That's their livelihood, and it's going to come through, whether it's a bar, whether it's a restaurant.
And the expectation is true. And again, I go back to something that I care about very deeply, which is hospitality. So like the reason I opened the bar is because I love bars, and I love the experience of, like, I love being in an empty bar, like Justin Burroughs' bar, Bad News Bar in downtown Houston, one of my favorites. And I love just being able to sit there and interact with the bartender. I've been to bars in my life where the bartender didn't really seem to give a shit that I was there.
Yeah.
And that's for me personally, no, I love Lakin, but like for me personally, if I go to a bar and the bartender doesn't really seem to care that I'm there, especially if it's not busy, it's a poor experience for me because my expectation is it's a little bit of interaction.
Sure.
And I tell this to my staff too. If somebody sits at the bar top, they're probably sitting there for a reason.
Exactly right.
And so I might just tip my kind of personal minimum because I would maybe go 50% if I just had a really pleasant day and they chatted with me or whatever. And so I get the nature of the industry. It makes sense, and it's.
Well, I want to say, I still think that this applies, and I think it's a slippery slope. That the whole hedonistic treadmill thing, where the generosities become an expectation.
Yeah.
And I think that still applies in a lot of situations, and at the same time, there's been this degradation of an expectation of performance.
I don't see that at all. In fact, I see my staff work harder than they ever have before.
Not talking about your staff.
No, I think you're the exception, not the rule. We're speaking more generally, not your place. Because that's my big gripe. That's the big reason I want to have this conversation is because I've seen this.
I would say in general, if you are going to places that don't, where you feel, because I think, let's get a little less specific and let's go off vibes, right? Let's be like Gen Z. Let's shift from boomer stuff to Gen Z stuff.
Okay.
So we'll go vibes only. So it's very easy for me to get the vibes of a restaurant or a bar when I go in there. And I think it probably is for us too, even if we don't articulate it like the young kids do these days. And so what I would suggest that you do is if you really care about this is to go off the vibes. And if you go to a place where the service model doesn't seem to give a shit about you as a person, if the vibes are off, then don't go there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like when I go to places, there are a couple of restaurants that I go to that are close to me, relatively speaking, like Tiny Champions, Nancy's Hustle. And all the staff there, in my experience over the years, since COVID even, has been exceptional.
Great.
And because they have a service model where they really emphasize it. And so I think what we're describing maybe are some places that just have started to prioritize money over service, generally speaking, and don't value you as a guest at all. And that's,
I would agree.
It's not really it doesn't have to do with the individual servers, but I would just avoid those restaurants and focus on restaurants where you generally get good service because they all tend to kind of go together.
But there's a middle ground there. There is a middle ground there.
Sure.
If you are a regular, there is a privilege of someone knowing who Pasha is.
Let
me be clear. If I agree, you mentioned Nancy's Hustle, we can mention Anvil, we can mention Poison Girl, we can mention all of the places that are well known in Houston to that scene, and when you walk in, they are going to treat you better because they know who you are, they know Rosewater, they know. So there is a difference between that and someone randomly, the general average consumer, walking into a Nancy's Hustle or something. The vibe is right, but they have piss poor service one night by one person. But I'll still expect a 30% or 20%, whatever the new expectation is. That's what I'm glomming onto because I
don't think it happens that often, and I'm still tipping 30, even if again it's just that's my personal bar. That's my personal bar.
You're a nice guy.
But and I might cringe about it. I might be like, this service sucked shit. I'm tipping 30, but I'm not liking it.
I'll pick on someone specifically. I love historically Anvil. But it's gotten to the point now when you go in there, you got to order 2 drinks at once because the wait time between drinks is 40 minutes.
Yep.
And
I mean, I don't go out much anymore at all these days. And I only Uber when I go to bars now, so I haven't had a chance to go to Anvil in a while.
Superb cocktail, next level performance.
I want to ask you a question on your standard of just giving 30 no matter what. How do you get your message across that you weren't happy with the service? You thought it could have been a little better.
So
doesn't a tip kind of indicate that?
I think
he for damn sure is not telling them.
A lot of people, no, for sure. I'm as anxious.
To me, a tip was always part of a way to say
it's to communicate.
Yeah,
I think in some ways that's true. When I see the day-to-day stresses that a lot of, and not just restaurant workers, but all of us, right? And again, this is just me. I'm not trying to guilt anybody at all. But like if I go to a restaurant and a server is in a bad mood or just not taking care of me well or whatever, one is like if I'm at a bar usually, it'll be one less thing I have to drink. And so I'll just leave. Like if I'm not enjoying the service, I'll just leave. I'll tip my 30% on one drink and then I'll leave. And so honestly, an easier way to express your displeasure is by leaving.
They don't know why you left. You might have just come in for one drink.
We typically get it. And here's the thing I will also say is that it's actually more meaningful for me as a proprietor, and even when I'm bartending, which isn't very much these days at all, as all my staff might laugh at me right now for saying that. But it's much more meaningful. I actually encourage you to find like a website or call them to see if you can talk to a manager to just convey that displeasure. that will go a long way to fixing the problem. I guarantee you. If it's like,
and I'll tell you, I've done that. And one thing I don't do is leave a Facebook or Yelp review. Yeah. I mean, because again, there's no reason to shit on a restaurant. If there's other people going there, if they're going to continue to do a shitty job, at some point they're going to go out of business.
And a lot of times, and there are two different types of sins in service. One is like an actively shitty attitude. So like if you have a server or a bartender who is just like being impolite to you, and you can tell that it's just they either don't care about you or they're being actively like mean. And again, I very rarely ever see this. It doesn't happen very often, so it's not common.
Yeah, Chris Morris.
But
no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I actually love Chris.
But no, Chris is great. But like it's very rare. But if that happens, like you can tell the difference between that and someone who just like didn't see you.
Yeah.
Because like I have all of us. We have
there.
dreams about that shit.
To have grace.
Sometimes we'll just like we'll forget something or it's busy or like I didn't see. I mean, I've had regulars even that have. I just didn't see my vision just didn't catch them in my eye.
Intentional bad service. I actually have a lot more patience for overwhelmed, disheveled, like just kind
you
of
heard
frazzled.
me give the example earlier. And the girl that's just got 6 tables. I get that.
And I think
that's not her fault.
I think that also might be sort of to kind of unpack this. That also might be my frame, my baseline here, because I so rarely see actively shitty service or rudeness in this industry. What I see most often is forgetfulness, or the other thing, and this is also sometimes on the manager's fault, which people don't realize, is that sometimes a restaurant will understaff, and so they have no choice. They're kind of fucked. And it could be on purpose. It could be a restaurant understaffing to kind of make the tips go further, or to lower what little hourly pay there is. In some cases,
it's a double-edged sword to make tips go further if tips are less.
We struggle with it too. You know what I mean? Like it's happened. We have to find the optimal service model where everybody gets the best service possible, the most attentive service possible, while still maintaining a decent number of dollars for the staff. But in some cases, they could just have a rush that you didn't expect. Like I remember there was one day, there was a federal holiday, and I kind of forgot, and I should know it because I'm a federal contractor. But we were slammed, and we didn't staff up for that. We didn't expect it to be that busy. And so if you were here that night, you didn't get attentive service as you would have normally when we staff appropriately, because we just didn't anticipate that rush. That's not the staff's fault.
But I hope consumers look at that too, because as a consumer going out, like we go out enough to know, I can look at a place and go, they are slammed.
Yeah. And most people,
the kitchen's slammed. I mean, getting food out, it's not going to. Let's order another cocktail.
Most people can, but I'm telling you, like sometimes the expectation is different, and it's. For the 95% of you guys that are understanding and kind and considerate,
and those people are shitty people, though.
They're
bad people.
And I want to say, you heard me mention the places we go in Houston and things. I think you agree, Chris. Most of the time, we get great service. I mean, 95, 98% of the time, we get great service because we go to places that we know people care.
And what do we? And honestly, what do we really think about when we think of great service? Because for me, it's mostly just attentiveness. Right? Like,
and friendliness.
Friendliness to an extent, but like I'm okay with.
You don't have to chat with me, but don't come over and go, okay, what do you guys want?
Attentiveness, I would agree. Being checked on.
Yeah, but that's a good point too. Like
you don't have to have a conversation with me, but just hey, we're gonna get you guys.
Yeah, I agree.
I called her sweetie and she got irritated. That's weird,
dude. It's funny you mention that because there's an opposite end of that spectrum where it kind of, I don't know how to describe this. It goes in a circle where sometimes, and this is mostly with men, but it's sometimes women.
Always with men.
But I've had women interact with me that way too.
Oh yeah,
but we are
Nancy,
the
old rich lady.
Yes, but like. The friendliness goes a little too far sometimes.
God,
and
it's so
people
gross.
cross the line, and it's creepy. And anyways, but
especially when alcohol's involved.
Those are the people. Honestly, if we're being very, very real here, the people that are either creepy with you or that demand excessive amounts of time, those are the only people, in my experience in this industry, that might ever get sort of looked down upon if they don't tip appropriately, because you're either being inappropriate with the staff or you're just monopolizing their time and being inconsiderate of the fact that they're trying to take care of other guests. But by and large, again, figure out what your baseline is, what you're comfortable with. I have my own baseline, everybody has their own. Just as long as you're respectful with your servers, as long as you tip what you're comfortable with, I think it's fine.
Yeah,
I don't think we have to stress too much about it.
You say that, but you also have said that there's an expectation of what should be given for living wage.
But that's my expectation.
But Chris brought up a good point when we talked about the comment about privilege. You can afford to tip.
Can you mark that down?
30%. And, so you get to this point where people go, okay, if a tip is now the expectation is 25, 30%. And to your point, their disposable income allows them to go, we can go to this restaurant, but 20 would be, based on the cost there, 20 would be our max tip. Should they not go since the expectation is 25, honestly, 30 as the baseline?
I can't say that's up to them. I would say
that's
nobody. So like, I'll say,
people have made that statement. To be clear, people have said if you can't afford to go out, then stay home.
People say that on online forums.
They can afford the food. It's where this tip percentage is going.
But here's the challenge: is that the way the industry is modeled, the food does not account for the labor costs, and that's the thing I think. And that's just the reality. Like,
well, I'm going to question that depending on the restaurant that you're at, because I can tell you that you pay $120 for a 16-ounce ribeye steak is probably, and it's not Wagyu from A5 Japan. It's probably not $120.
Yeah. So
especially when they're buying in bulk and stuff. So I mean, you're paying for the experience. That's what you're paying for.
Sure.
So, a part of it anyway.
But the bottom line is that most restaurant workers are just simply, most restaurants are simply not including their labor costs in their prices. And so the gratuity that we pay as consumers.
They've got to cover at least the $213.
$213 that they're legally, most of them are doing
but
whatever they legally have to do.
But again, they don't need to cover the labor cost in their prices because there are no labor costs in their prices. So the idea, and restaurants historically don't make a ton of money. I mean, the average restaurant doesn't survive the first 3 years, let alone the first 5. So, but you don't have to account for that money. If I walk in with a table with family of 6, 4 kids and a wife that's better than me in every way, we're going to spend $200 on lunch. Reasonable restaurants could be Gringos.
Yeah,
it's going to be $150, $170 for a family of 6. If we don't think about it, we order a couple appetizers. I order a couple drinks. My wife orders a couple drinks. We're going to be there an hour and 15. They're going to make $45 an hour. Like it's not.
So again, that also doesn't include the tip out that they're probably, especially at a corporate restaurant like Gringos, they're probably being forced to tip out substantial amounts. And that's
what's substantial.
So I mean, at least I would say 30% based on what I've heard.
30%,
possibly, yeah, because they're going to tip out the bartender.
I'll ask my daughters; they both wait tables there.
That's a again.
I've never worked at Gringos. I don't know, but I've heard from people that work in the industry, especially the more corporate the restaurant is, the more tip out you're having to make to other staff. And so that $45 that you're tipping is not going to them in its entirety.
Isn't that kind of approach detrimental to the establishment? I mean, if you had you keep what you earn, wouldn't everybody be doing better?
Well, I mean, they could keep what they earn, but the restaurant would then need to pay the rest of the staff more to account for the fact that they're not because like the reason for
you say the rest of the staff, are we talking busboys? And
it depends on every restaurant's different, but like let's say,
but they could be included in that.
Yeah, and so again, like we tip out a small percentage to our food runner because that's one less task for our front of the house staff to have to worry about, and in reality, they actually end up making more money because they're not having to spend as much time running food. They can sell more drinks, for example. That's the only tip out that we do. But I've heard of restaurants that have tip outs for all kinds of positions, including back of the house. Yeah. That's where it kind of gets shady. Okay. And that's where, and again, like I wouldn't, in an egalitarian system, I think tipping out in principle is not categorically wrong. What concerns me is that if you're tipping out to further compensate for lower than appropriate wages so that
for the
CEO of Gringos can be extra wealthy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's why, again, I really want people to focus on the ethos of, if you can, the places you're going to, focus on local places because more...
She said 3.8%.
Total.
Yeah, so out of the total tipping at Gringos to tip out bussers and hostesses is 3.8% of their tips.
Per position or...
Total.
Completely. That's...
So if they bring out, or if they make $100, $3.80 goes towards the bussers and hosts. But it's on 20 waiters for the evening. So
and you probably have 3.
Yeah, and they were both hostesses before that. But I'm with you. I'm not fundamentally disagreeing. I'm just curious about the details.
Again, in general, I would say, I just wouldn't stress about it as much. Like I would, if you had one of you guys asked the question of like, if it's 20 versus 25, should I go there? I would say if it's a 25 or a 20 preset, again, I can only speak to the culture at my bar, but if you came here and looked at our presets and you wanted to tip the lowest preset that we recommend, it's fine. We mostly don't even see it. It's automated in the system now. So,
I'll agree there. I think that there is and I know we're running out of time, but I largely, by and large, people probably don't notice in the hustle and bustle of things. unless they specifically see a shitty tip.
Or if you're being a dick. So that's the other thing. And I see my staff do this too. Most of us are aware that there is, because a lot of the tablets now that we use, which makes our operations more efficient, gets your drinks and food faster, have the thing where you press the tip or you write it in, whatever.
They
and
just stand right there and give it to you.
And it's awkward.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
It's awkward for us.
Judge you.
So most of us look away. All my staff, and I see it, and I do it too. When we put that in front of you, we look away because we don't want you to feel that pressure.
Yeah.
Oh, we already do.
Yeah, and I get it.
But I do agree with what you're saying.
But we actively try to make that interaction as pleasant and non-awkward as possible. The only time it might happen is if you've been an exceptionally overly demanding or creepy guest, we might take a peek and see what this motherfucker is doing.
You've made me think about tipping a little bit differently than coming into this. And an example of that would be, two examples I would give where I never tip, and I'm going, why the hell are you asking me for a tip?
Is the to go,
the takeout stuff.
Well, not just the to go. Two new examples would be, I go to a coffee shop, and they're a coffee bar, but they also sell coffee beans, and I buy 3 bags. I grab what I want. I take them up to the register.
Do you tip on those?
I don't. $50. They flip it around for me for a tip, and I go.
I don't have an answer for that.
I'm not tipping you on.
Do you tip 30%?
Let me explain something to you about me.
And I'm going.
Again.
Should I? Is it a labor cost that I should kick something
whore.
in?
I am a stack of neuroses.
I'm wondering what kind of service I could offer you.
So if you buy a couple pounds of coffee, you're going to tip 30 points on...
And that's the tip option,
so let me,
22, 25%.
Let me explain something about me. So there's a bread guy that I buy bread from, and he bakes bread for us. We have it on the weekends, and he also has a stand at the farmer's market in Nassau Bay on the weekends. Coastal Bake Shop, they make amazing bread. When I go, it's a default. Because the other thing, a lot of these POS systems have that as an automatic default, and you can change the amounts, but they've got a tip option, and I tip on that. I just go and pick up a loaf of bread from him, and
this is where
I tip on it in Nassau Bay.
Is it a market? You
Farmers
said?
market? Yeah.
Yeah, I would tip there too.
Yeah,
because those are different people,
and also because I know that he doesn't
It's
make a
going
lot
to
of
him.
money. Yeah, it's going to him directly, and so if you give me a tip option, I'm just a person with a guilty tip conscience.
So another example I'll give you is I go to a lot of wine bars here in town, and they're a wine bar / wine shop. And sometimes I'll just stop in and I'm picking up 6 bottles of wine and $300. I carry them up to the counter, $300. They turn it around. They want a 20, 22, 25% tip. You tipping?
Again, I might be the wrong person for this conversation now because I'm going to say yes every time.
It's just curious to me.
But it really depends on their model. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. That's why it all gets down to what the staff is making on average as their take home. If the model is based around minimizing their labor costs and they're paying these people as little as possible. I picked
out 6 bottles of wine, $300. I should tip another $90 because
I had this experience at there's a brewery that I love called Equal Parts. And when I go, and I'll be honest, I don't know the answer to this question. As a person who has worked behind a bar, I'll be like, I don't expect it, but I'll be gracious. Actually, so I'm rambling. Sorry. So I go pick up a case of beer at Equal Parts, and they have a tip option on the thing. And all I did was I actually pulled the beer out of the cooler myself, put it on the bar top, and they just literally rang me in.
Yeah.
I did all the work.
Yeah.
I still tip 25-30% on that one. And again, that's just me. Just
where
clarify.
do you stand on that, Chris?
Negative, sir.
And that's fine. I think, and honestly, if as a bartender now, the reason I do that is because I know how much uncertainty there is in your shift in a bartender, and deserved or not, if maybe that it's a slow day, so I want to give them a little extra just because I've worked as a bartender. And so, but as a bartender myself, if you come in, we have these things called elixirs that we did during COVID, where it's like a premix, fresh sour mix.
Absolutely love them.
And there's a lot of labor that goes into making them. But if I'm selling you, this is just me personally, if I'm selling you something prepackaged and you come into my bar, if you decide not to tip, if you do tip, I will be very gracious. It's very generous of you to do that. But I do not have that expectation because I have not interacted with you much. So I wouldn't stress about that too much.
There's another wine bar I go to, and the owner there will say, no, we don't, on to-go bottles, we don't ask you for a tip.
Yeah,
I actually respect that from him.
And you brought up actually a really good point, which is that in some cases, if you're uncertain, just ask. Be like, because I think
well, I mean, they're flipping it around because they're hoping they're just going to go up to you.
Well, but
if you want to.
Yeah, because I mean, they're hoping. Like, if I'm,
That's pressure.
it's pressure, but like,
And then if there's a person or two behind you, you're like, wait, am I
And I
looking
think
like an
that's
asshole
I
not
think that's
tipping?
the fundamental issue a lot of people have is there seems to be this societal pressure that is, I would say at times, inappropriate.
but nobody's.
I
Gonna,
agree.
But nobody's following you home. Nobody's gonna remember who you are.
No, but they're
really.
judging you even in the moment, even
But
if
honestly,
they don't forget you.
but who cares? Like, people judge
Again,
us
it's
for
a
all
wine
kinds
bar
of
you
reasons.
go back to, but and you want to support them by buying
Who
wine
cares
from there.
is something that
No, I mean,
that as
no,
someone who does 30% and is super generous all the time, no matter what,
Yeah.
it's who cares doesn't apply to you. But there are other people who make good money
No,
and are generous
no.
all the time for good work.
I don't mean who cares about money. I mean, who cares about like pressure and
No,
peer
that's
pressure,
what I'm
that kind
talking
of
about.
stuff.
Yeah. So for you, you don't have to be receptive to that pressure because you always do it no matter what without question. But for anyone else who's more appropriate or logical in the way that they handle it, they are now susceptible to that pressure that is
But the baseline's different. So if I, for example, went to a bar and their recommended, like 30% is kind of my baseline. If their recommended tips were 30, 50, 70%, I'm going to, without concern, tip 30%. That's my baseline. That's what, in my experience,
Right.
is what's going to give the staff a decent amount of money. I could be wrong there, but I think like I'm not going to feel
But
shame.
if it's a pickup order
if it's a
and you go to get 6 bottles of wine and the options are 20, 25, and 30 or no tip or custom tip or whatever the case might be, what I'm saying is I do think that there is something to be said for the societal in that moment, even though it's brief, even if they won't remember you, it's inappropriate. I think at times you don't agree. That's essentially what he's saying and what a lot of people complain about.
because that's how else we offer you the option to tip.
Because
But
My point is you
the
shouldn't
receipt,
option.
on the receipt, the tipping line.
well, part of it is, quite frankly, that it's quicker, especially for these tablets. Like we typically when we have the tickets may have like recommended and a lot of
Quicker,
people,
we're talking about a few seconds here. You print out a ticket and people see a tip line. That is different than this implication and all, takes up the whole screen. You've got 3 options and then the shit.
yeah.
Pretty
Some
big,
places,
pretty big.
some people, have you seen the photo recently where they put a sticker over the no tip sign so you literally couldn't press
Oh
it?
yeah. I've seen that.
And the sticker was,
That's sneaky as
please
fuck.
tip.
Yep.
I mean,
Well,
look,
here's another question. Places like Five Guys or somewhere online, you're going to go pick up a burger.
Yeah.
And 'cause that's where I've seen it. I
Yeah.
don't think it was Five Guys, but a restaurant like that where they would not let you get out of the tip option. And I'm like, I'm ordering. I'm going to come pick it up. I'm going to walk in
This
and
is-
get it. What am I tipping you for?
these are different business models. So the business
No,
models-
I know,
yeah, yeah.
but I'm just
And
trying to get your
I don't have
overall
an-
tipping where you where's your line? Let me ask you this. Is there an industry that could ask for a tip that you would go bullshit?
My doctor,
Well, how about this scenario? Because we're talking about service industry. If you go to a wine bar, some people might go, hey, if somebody helped you pick out those 6 bottles, it might be justified to ask you for a little
Oh,
something.
sure. A little concierge treatment. Yeah.
So if I go to Home Depot and I need some paint, I'm like, man, I don't know if I want, flat, matte, eggshell. What do I color scheme? I'm kind of, and the guy helps you for 25 minutes, and there's a tip jar
Tip
up there.
creep is all I'm saying.
Do you tip
creep.
them?
Probably not in that situation.
Why not?
At Home Depot, you said? Sorry, I was focused on the guests that were.
Guy's only making
sorry.
$12 an hour.
Yeah, that's
It's
a
not a
fair
livable
question.
wage.
It's fair. It's a fair question. Honestly, I probably should be tipping. Honestly.
I don't think you should.
I'm just saying,
It's just- I'm
but
just
it's-
showing you where it's going.
But
to.
no.
I mean,
But the thing is, like in general, but I think there are a lot of these situations that are a little bit sort of outside. There's several deviations away from the norm. I'm focused on
until they are the norm.
And I think that's the point is
Well-
there's that tip creep.
but we sort of decide
Yeah.
collectively, right? So like to me it's a little bit strange that some of these situations now we're being asked to tip when we didn't used to get asked to tip. And again, my primary concern with that is not the money itself, it's how the money's being used. What I resent is people that are already wealthy making more money off the backs of their employees or that guilt that you feel.
And
And I
agree-
can see
I'm
that.
agree-
I
I
agree
agree with
100%
both of those
with
things.
that. But as a consumer, we don't know which is which.
So what I would do, in generally speaking, if you're at a corporate restaurant, they've fucking got plenty of money.
Screw them.
They should be paying them more, a little
Yeah,
bit, yes.
stop going to Landry's.
Yes, you should definitely not support people who have made billions on the backs of their staff and on your guilt at tipping.
Do you think that it's possible for there to be an ethical billionaire? Are you in that camp?
I will tell you this as an owner of a bar, I could not imagine becoming a billionaire off my employees' work. I simply couldn't. That's my personal opinion. I don't see how I could do that ethically.
Ooh, can I?
Yes, please do.
You can disagree
It
if you
just
want.
occurred to me. No, not disagree, but what about becoming a millionaire off your people?
There's certainly a line.
Okay,
I don't know
where's that line with
I don't
someone
know where
like
it is.
Dee?
It's like pornography.
Killings.
You know it when you see it.
You're not
You
on
know when you see
OnlyFans?
it.
No. I was going to actually have my own OnlyFans.
It is shaky. I don't know where the line is, but there is plenty of people who have 20, 30-year-old restaurants. I mean, Gringos is
And
a
they're
family.
rich.
I know the family. They're rich, but they're not billionaires.
Again, I'm not saying this is my moral judgment does not apply to everybody. I'm saying it is my personal opinion. So how I live my life, I couldn't personally feel comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I don't like my first thought anytime if we have like a busy night or whatever is like, how can I give this money back to staff in some way? That's my personal feeling, right? The things that kind of piss me off are when I remember during COVID when there's a very prominent bar owner who their staff had been laid off, and I saw a bar owner driving a fucking Maserati or some shit.
Who?
I'm not going to say, but that when I see shit like that, it pisses me off because it's. I find it.
Does it start with a B?
I'm not. I don't even know. I don't know
Somebody's
I could have
throwing the
car
fishing
wrong.
pole in.
But like things like that make me again personally upset.
Sure.
I'm not saying you have to be upset about it. It's just
Yeah.
my personal approach to life. I would rather be. I'm not a.
And this conversation wasn't so much
No, you're
to
very-
drill down on you
but
and
like-
your approach. It
but-
was more of the you having more of a general view of this world and
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
pulling the veil back a little bit
Yeah.
for us to see what goes on behind the
Yeah.
scene, so to speak.
And again, it's just me.
There's a much deeper philosophical discussion here that I would love to have one day, probably not on camera, about if we really want to support our staff. Oof, never mind. Off camera.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later.
Yeah, I think that I appreciate your sentiment because I love that your instinct is I would rather, how can I take care of them before I take care of myself? That's great, and I'm all for it. However, I do think that there are some business out there just by the very nature that if, let's just say you have one laundromat that makes the average laundromat makes $100,000 a year in profit. If you have 10 of them, you're making $1 million. So are you unethical?
So there's, and this is definitely getting off topic, but so if you have, for
There
example,
were 10 Rosewaters out there.
so if I had a robot, but like laundromats don't have employees, they have
Yeah,
machines.
they do.
So,
Sure they do. I mean, well, not as many
like,
employees.
You might have like one employee managing it, generally speaking, and you should pay them. But like anytime I've been to a laundromat to do laundry, there've been machines and I just put quarters
What's
in.
a
and shit.
laundromat?
Yeah. So just to be clear, the regardless of laundromat, the concept is the same with Rosewater. If Rosewater, let's just say, makes $100,000 a year in profit, that's a reasonable salary for an owner to make themselves without being rich off the back of their employees. But if you decide to take Rosewater to all four corners,
We're talking about scale here, right?
Yeah,
I get that, but I personally would not. I would redirect money towards my staff. Basically, that's my personal philosophy. That's just me. So I couldn't be comfortable if I scaled up. Again, that's just me.
Well, I know we're off topic a little bit, but multiple locations means multiple staff. So each location,
Right.
you're creating jobs.
Yeah,
you're
so
giving
yeah.
other people opportunity to have income and a lifestyle. And
True.
So I'm
saying-
you still are responsible for now instead of just one
Yeah.
and 20 people. You got 200 people. Why
So-
shouldn't you be rewarded a little bit more?
I don't even make any money with this shit now, but like
That's pressure.
Which my
It
underlying
is.
issue there is I don't think it's necessarily wrong to do so, which is me defending the example I gave of Killens. Is I don't think it's necessarily wrong, and I know firsthand from what I've seen that she's gone above and beyond to make this place thrive and to be supportive. I don't think there's necessarily unethical millionaires, but if you have enough of these little widgets that all work and contribute a small piece at a time, you can actually be very wealthy.
And here's the way I would say it. Here's the way I would say it is your margin. If you're operating within a margin at
Right.
each location that allows you to pay them a certain wage because you have so many employees, if you get to a point where your margin now is 80%, then by God, you ought to share
There
that
ain't
wealth
no
a little
way.
bit.
Agreed.
There ain't no
No,
way
I
that's
know,
happening in the
I know,
restaurant
I know.
industry.
No, not at all.
You don't work off 80% margins?
I can't
Are you
even-
hitting 15?
The thought of it, I just had a feeling in my body that I cannot describe without using pornographic terminology. If I had that kind of margin,
But I'm just saying, if your margins go up where
Yeah.
you're making a shit ton of money,
I think
then share the wealth.
I think look, I'll be honest. Like I've put probably 20,000 hours of unpaid labor into this bar. I opened it up with taking money out of my savings at great risk. And I understand the desire to make, it's basically an investment, a return on the investment. I get that totally. I also agree, for me, and I don't know what it is, it's a sliding scale. I think there is an ethical margin that is appropriate. And beyond that, I think maybe.
But it's hard to give specifics.
It depends. Beyond that, I think people should consider spending more money on their labor, basically.
Well, I don't disagree. I call it reinvesting into your business.
And also,
that's how you keep people.
Exactly.
We need to get going.
Exactly. Yes, sir. In general, I think the takeaway is just like,
don't feel bad.
yeah, don't feel bad.
Don't feel bad.
Just do what you can. It's the
You're
model.
talking about human emotion. That's a
Yeah,
tough,
no, for sure. But like, it's but human emotion exists. We can't get past it. So just the simple primer is just like do what you can. Don't feel guilty about it. That's it. It's hard to work in these restaurants. The pay is not covered in the cost of the food or the drinks. That's just the way the industry was designed in this country. It's unfortunate.
The biggest hurdle I still haven't gotten over is the percentage difference. I'm all for tipping. I just, I'm still going to operate and give tips based on my experience because I don't have any other measurement to do that.
So here's an example of, and again, I can't speak for all business owners, but I'll try to be as succinct as possible. When we decided what we thought our appropriate recommended gratuity was for this place, it is based on the amount of time that we experienced making drinks, for example, the amount of time it took us to interact with guests, to be able to provide a decent amount of service to all of our guests. And then also, like, at the end of the day, just looking at what our employees take home.
Yeah.
And we were like, this number gets us to a number that we're comfortable with. Our employees, our employees are comfortable with it. We're comfortable with it. It already coincides with what people were doing anyways. So
that makes sense.
That made sense for us.
Sure.
We're like, I can tell you, at least for me, we're not trying to gouge people when we have like our recommended gratuity. I can't speak for all in the industry. In general, I would say tip what you're comfortable with and try not to feel too guilty about it. Again, because most people are doing their best. They don't want you to feel guilty about it, generally speaking. So just go out and have fun. And if it feels like too much, then just don't do it.
Chris, final words. Anything change for you? Different opinion, different perspective?
I think we landed on the similar thought. My thought was, I think when you see it in black and white on social media, it becomes a much more hotly debated topic. But realistically, I think Pasha's correct in that, and you may want to mark that down, that generally speaking, if you just keep doing what you always do, there's not going to be... Now, I still agree with your examples of tipped up front, turning the screen around. Those can be very frustrating, but by and large, the actual experience in most bars and restaurants, no one really notices or is going to give you a hard time. And I guess I didn't think about that coming into this because of how much we think about online arguments about the subject.
And we have our individual concerns that kind of tend to stay with us. But like if you're turning 100 covers in a night, you really don't have even the mental capability to remember.
To process every little...
Exactly. Nobody's going to remember exactly what you pressed on that screen at all. Like they literally won't.
And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing when we talked about, how you kind of then grade how are you performing? Because if you don't know what you're doing wrong, how are you going to improve it?
So and again, you can.
Anyway,
we can talk about this further, but like you could talk to the manager. You could give them a little extra cash if you want to make them feel extra special.
Yeah.
There's that like classic.
Not the manager, the waiter.
Yeah, the waiter. Not the manager.
Don't give it to the manager.
Good
point. But anyways, the bottom line is go out there, have fun.
Bottom line
don't
is
stress
stop
about
being
it.
a piece of shit.
That's
it.
Just
stop being
give
a piece of
30%. Be like Pasha. I'm gonna get a T-shirt made. Be like Pasha.
I do whatever I think feels best for you, and pay attention generally to the culture of the places that you're going.
Well, I'll say at least this: hearing you speak and the passion that you have, and the way that you do want to take care of your employees and your guests. If you're in the Houston area and you haven't been to Rosewater, come out and,
it's okay.
and come check it out.
It's okay. It's an okay place.
And if you're mad at anything he said, go to Preamble.
Well, thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey. And until our next episode, enjoy your next pour.
Thanks, man.
But honestly, Chris,
What about Chris? You're this